You have a reading? Yeah, okay. Hey, can you start then? Start us off with man, the only working animal. Mm-hmm. 144, right? Wait, are we on the... Oh, there's no page numbers. My bad. Right here. This one. This thing. Page numbers are different. Bewildering. Okay, good. Stop there. So, the feast of life is therefore before us, and the only question is what appetite we have for it. This chapter is titled The Importance of Loafing. What's loafing? What does that mean? What does loafing mean? What does it mean to loaf? Yeah, are you searching it up? What does loafing mean? Can you search it up for us? Let us know. Yeah? Did you find it? Oh. Okay. Loafing. Loafing is a kind of hanging around where you are not particularly productive. Have you guys heard of the term being a loafer? Someone that like leeches off of someone else's work? No? Okay. To loaf means to spend your time in a non-productive or aimless way. Give me a pen. Here. Actually, there's one right there. Right? So, the point of this chapter is going to be arguing about why it's important to actually not have a purpose in doing things occasionally. Why it's important to actually loaf and just chill occasionally, right? Can you guys before we even start reading it, think of how it can connect with readings we've done so far. Utopia for Realists and Heretics and BS Jobs, right? What's the argument for Utopia for Realists that we've seen so far? What are some of the things that the author is trying to articulate? Several important aspects about Utopia for Realists. What are the arguments? What about Heretics? Give me stuff. From both or Heretics? Or? Okay, important to have a belief. Good. Can we also find the same support for this statement in Utopia for Realists? Yes or no? Go to page 20 of Utopia for Realists and look at the start of the Return of Utopia. It's time to return to utopian thinking. We need a new lodestar, a new map of the world that once again includes a distant, uncharted continent. Utopia, right? And then skip ahead to the last paragraph on page 21. One thing is certain, however, without all those wide-eyed dreamers down through the ages, we would all still be poor, hungry, dirty, afraid, stupid, sick, and ugly. Without Utopia, we are lost. Right? So it's actually the same argument as Heretics, where he says man must have his own religion. Right? So it is the same. That's right. What about Utopia for Realists? Anything else from UFR? Any other key ideas that he's really trying to articulate here? And if it relates with this one, the importance of loafing. Can we make any kind of connections here? Does the author ask us to work harder, work less hard, or maybe not sure, not so clear? Let's go to page 54 of Utopia for Realists and take a look. Why poor people do dumb things? A world without poverty might be the oldest utopia around, but anyone who takes this dream seriously must inevitably face a few tough questions. Why are the poor more likely to commit crimes? Why are they more prone to obesity? Why do they use more alcohol and drugs? In short, why do the poor make so many dumb decisions? Skip ahead to page 56, next page. The power of context. These are harsh questions, but then it's not just anybody asking them. It's Eldar Shafir, a psychologist at Princeton University. He and Sendhil Mullainathan, an economist at Harvard, recently published A Revolution in New Theory on Poverty. The gist, it's the context, stupid. Right? And then the next one, page 57. You can't take a break from poverty. Despite all this, the drawbacks of a scarcity mentality are greater than the benefits. Scarcity narrows your focus to your immediate lack, to the meeting that's starting in 5 minutes, or the bills that need to be paid tomorrow. The long-term perspective goes out the window. Scarcity consumes you, Schaefer explained. You're less able to focus on other things that are also important to you. Any guesses? Any connections that you guys are seeing with the importance of loafing? Do you have this piece, by the way? Yeah, right? Okay, good. So on page 57 for Utopia for Realists, by the way. The importance of spending your time in a non-productive and aimless way. How can it relate with, say, page 57 of Utopia for Realists, where he says, scarcity narrows your focus to your immediate lack, to the meeting. The long-term perspective goes out the window. Scarcity consumes you. You're less able to focus on other things that are also important to you. Great. Importance of living. Importance of loafing. The idea is when you are too busy, you don't have time to actually think about the important things, right? And once we start thinking about busyness, do you remember in earlier chapters he was talking about how there's like this myth or the belief of a 15-hour work week where because we're so rich, we don't have to actually work. And because we have the resources, we can actually do what we want, right? And that actually didn't happen. So too busy in today's age. Busyness leads to a clog, right, in mental clarity. These two are complementary arguments to each other, right? On one side, the importance of loafing is pro, why we should have free time. The other side is also why we should have free time, but argues from the other direction. Why not having free time is bad, right? Ian, can you read the next two paragraphs for page 57? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Analogous. Yep. Keep going. Hmm? Nathan. If you want to understand the coordinate nature of the mind, elsewhere, you're right.
Self-control flows like a child. You're distracted and easy with
Perturb.
truth, and this happens every day. This whole scarcity, whatever of time or of money, leaves you with unwise decisions.
Great. Right? So the argument is very clear, right? When you can't think or when you're too busy to think, you can't make smart decisions. So the solution to this is what? The solution to being too busy. Take a break. Have more free time. Right? That's the general idea of this piece then. Right? Before we even started reading, what we just did was using what we've already learned from Utopia for Realists as a springboard or a segue into new pieces of reading. Does that make sense? It's really useful to, before you even start reading, to imagine, like, could the argument be this? Could the argument be that, right? So making hypothetical assumptions. Before you even start reading, you can actually expect, right? Set up expectations. Like, I think the reading is probably going to be about this since I've learned something else similar, right? And then using that expectation as the ruler or benchmark to see if we are following the same argument, right? Rather than just going in blind. That's a really big difference. Now he goes on, right? Joshua, can you read this for us then, the first paragraph? Man, the only working animal.
Only to look, rather than look for another. The wish must be active. Because with the progress of civilization, that makes it because of being more complex. With these, responsibility, risk, inhibition, and conditions. We're not a nature, but a freedom society. While I am sitting here before my death, pigeon is my body, while a church people before my living. Not worrying what it is going to happen next. I know what my life is more complicated affair than it is. Is that new article complete, I think, and will stop thousands of people that work in a highly complicated system of cultivation. Maybe dietary transportation, delivery, or preparation. That is what it is hard for man to get through that family. Nevertheless, the gentle peace will let loose in the city and gain some attention of what really being life is all about. You would feel it. Good feel like skepticism and be all in economics. This is
Good. So what is already his main argument? What is Lin's point? What is Lin Yutang's view on work? Say it again. Purpose of life. Where are you getting that? Can you read it?
works because he has to take this the progress of civilization like that should be more complex. His duties become very easier than his civilization and ambition. Or not of nature, but of civil society.
Good. So he says he works, but is this him or is this just like a general person that he's talking about? And also, does he actually like work? This is really interesting. Let's think about this more. So, let's look at the subtitle here. The man, the only working animal, right? What does that mean? Human beings are the only animal. Yeah, the only animals that work, right? So, there's two possible conclusions from this, right? Either Lin thinks this means human beings are superior to animals, right? Or what's the alternative? Inferior. Inferior in what way? Actually, let's hold off on that. So, because he makes this claim, right, that human beings are the only animals that work, the case is either he thinks human beings are great because we work and no other animals work. The other is human beings are terrible because we're the only animals that work. Everybody is just free to be themselves, right? We don't know whether or not he thinks it's positive or negative yet, right? But at what point, when is the first indication that he thinks of one or the other? Where is the earliest point that reveals his side of the argument? Which stance he's taking? Probably a really good clue when he mentions what word? Huh? Nope, way sooner, right? He says man is the keyword here is what? Working. The key here is working animal, right? Man is also animal, it's just that we are the only working animal, right? So therefore, the first place where he's going to show or talk about his side of the argument is where? Is it the first sentence, second sentence, or third sentence? Or fourth? Jason, you need a pen. You got a pen? Okay, use it. Kaden, what do you think? Don't know. Queenie, any guesses? What does bewildering mean? What does this word mean? Confusing. Good. Bewilder. Confusing. I'll show you right now why this sentence is critical for understanding, or for figuring out the orientation of the argument. After all, the most bewildering thing about man is his idea of work and the amount of work he imposes upon himself, or civilization has imposed upon him. If I change the single word bewildering to say the greatest, after all, the greatest thing about man is his idea of work, it suddenly changes the value judgment of the entire argument. Right? But instead of greatest, he's saying it's the most confusing. What kind of connotation is that? Positive or negative? Negative. Right? Therefore, he takes which side of the argument? Does he think man is superior to animals or inferior to animals? Inferior because of what? Because we work. Exactly. That's it. Right? Therefore, man is inferior precisely because we work. If you're in a pinch, you're done. You don't need to read anymore. You understand the argument. Right? 3 sentences in, you're done. You understand. Right? The key here to understanding is vocabulary. That bewildering. That single word can change the whole thing. Right? His entire position is based on that single value. He thinks it's confusing that we work. Right? After all, the most bewildering thing about man is his idea of work and the amount of work he imposes upon himself, or civilization has imposed upon him. After all, the most confusing thing, right? All nature loafs, while man alone works for a living. So, if you hadn't understood that first sentence, the second part wouldn't be clear to you. Because if you imagine, he says, after all, the greatest thing, the most wonderful thing, right? The most wonderful thing about man is his idea of work. All nature loafs, while man alone works for a living. That makes it sound like man is superior because we are hardworking, right? He works because he has to, because with the progress of civilization, life gets incredibly more complex with duties, responsibilities, fears, inhibitions, and ambitions, born not of nature, but of human society. So now that we know his position, his orientation, what are other things that we can also assume now? What are the things that he thinks are good, and what are the things that he thinks are bad? We know that work is bad. What are things that he considers good? From the key words here, what about loafing? Joshua, what do you think? Good. What about nature? Good. Okay. Other things that are good and bad. Human society? Bad. Good. What about progress? Probably, right? Good. Okay. The second part of this is an analogy, right? So if you understood this part, you don't really need that second part to understand that argument. The second part is really just illustrating with example. That while I'm sitting here before my desk, a pigeon flying around, blah, 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 he's just talking about the comparison using lunch, what the pigeon does and what he does, right? The difference between humans thinking about lunch and animals thinking about lunch. And in case you haven't really got the point, he says, nevertheless, if a jungle beast were let loose in a city and gained some apprehension of what busy human life was all about, he would feel a good deal of skepticism and bewilderment about this human society. Right? That if an animal or a dog gained consciousness, they would want to go back being a dog. Right? It's just like, I don't want this. Like, why are humans doing this to themselves? Right? So all of this are just additional examples. And in critical reading, the key really is to figure out, okay, the argument is here. The examples are here. Right? You need to develop this ability to see, okay, that this section is what's really important. The rest of this, if I don't understand this, I won't understand this. So you want to spend, say, 80% of your energy here and just 20% in trying to understand the examples. You don't even need to really pay attention to the rest, right? And within this this point, this sentence and this keyword is where you want to put 80% of your energy, right? That's really the determining factor, that single word. That'll decide where things fall on the left or right, good or bad. Okay. Annabelle, can you read the next part?
The first thought that jungle beast would have is that man is only working animal, with the exception of a few dogs, horses, or buffaloes made to work them out. Even domestic pets don't have to work. Police dogs are but rarely called upon to do their duty. The house dog is supposed to watch its house place most of the time. He takes a nap in the morning whenever there is good warm sunshine. The aristocratic cat certainly never works for a living, and gifted with bodily facilities which enables it to disregard of neighboring pets. It is even unconscious of its captivity.
Captivity, yep. Sorry.
It just goes wherever it likes to go. So then, he has been throwing humanity alone, caged and domesticated. But not that, forced by the civilization and complex society to work to worry about the matter of feeding itself. Humanity has its own advantage. I'm quite aware the delight of knowledge, the pleasures of conversation, and the joy of the imagination, as for instance in watching stage play. But the essential fact remains that human life is far too complicated, and a matter of merely feeding ourselves directly or indirectly is occupying well over 90% of our human activities. Civilization is largely a matter of seeking food, while progress is a development which makes food more and more difficult to get.
Okay, good. Let's stop there. If you really pay attention to what I was doing here as Annabelle read, right, it's categorizing what the important sentences are, right? That first part, he's just going on with examples. So the form of this paragraph is kind of inverted, right? The first part is example, then he cuts into the point where he says, so then, right? In my head, when I see this, the so word and then, that's trying to tell me the answer. We have this toiling humanity alone, caged and domesticated, but not fed, right? The fact that it's italicized is another hint that He's trying to make a point, right? Forced by this civilization and complex society to work and worry about the matter of feeding itself, right? So he's trying to show the kind of twisted nature or the perversion of human society, right? That a cat never needs to work, and because it can jump over the fence, it doesn't even know it's captivated, right? And in fact, it's actually us human beings that are the ones domesticated, as in, we can't rely on ourselves to be free, right? Humanity has its own advantages, I'm quite aware. Why is this not that important? This is really just nuance, right? This is just nuance. But it's not the main point. Because his main point is here. This is main, right? That's just nuance. He's like, okay, the main problem is that civilization and complex society is forcing us to worry about how to feed ourselves. Sure, there are nice things about humanity, but, right, that's how you know, because it's sandwiched between the main idea, sure, but. He goes back to that main point, the essential fact. Another hint, essential, that's the key word. Remains, still, right? But the essential fact remains, in other words, means still. That human life has got too complicated. So this is the point, right? Well, part of the main point. That human life is too complicated. Human life, not animal life. Civilization is largely a matter of seeking food, while progress is that development which makes food more and more difficult to get. This sentence is really interesting because it's unusual. This is a bit weird, right? Usually we think progress is technological innovation. Or we think progress is the invention of the iPhone, or progress is Tesla, right? Or sending a man to the moon. That's progress. But here, there's a totally different interpretation of the word progress. You guys see what I'm saying here? He takes a usual or common understanding of the word and then changes it. Applies a totally different association to progress. And here he says, is that development which makes food more and more difficult to get. Right? So rather than being a technological innovation, instead it is a kind of a complication, right? Or the thing that makes life more complicated. The really interesting thing to keep in mind here is this is where insight occurs, right? That as a writer, whenever you want to deliver true insight, it occurs right here. Insight is essentially, right, a new perspective on things. That is more true. This is a form of insight. When you can make a claim, substantiate it with examples, and then finalize it with this sentence, right? Civilization is this, progress, however, is that development which makes food more and more difficult to get. If it had not been so difficult for man to obtain his food, there would be absolutely no reason why humanity should work so hard, right? Another substantiating claim to this idea. It's just support. The danger is that we get over-civilized and that we come to a point, as indeed we have already done, when the work of getting food is so strenuous that we lose our appetite for food in the process of getting it. Now this is just irony, right? He's just pushing the point even further or deeper by saying we're so stressed to find food that the stress makes us not want to eat it in the process of trying to find it. This doesn't seem to make very much sense from the point of view either of the jungle beast or the philosopher, right? And the funny thing is he's actually standing in the same side as a beast, right? He associates, right? So it kind of gives the jungle beast a certain kind of admirable quality. That being in nature is kind of cool, right? Kind of nice. Again, all of this, the reason why we can understand all of this so far is from the fact that we understood that missing word, bewilderment, right? Without understanding bewilderment, the rest of this doesn't make a lot of sense because we aren't sure where he stands, right? Over civilization. Therefore, over. Yep. Okay. Jason, can you read the next part?
Every time I see a city skyline or a room open, the dread of food, I get excited. It is positively amazing. 2 and 3 water towers. The bag of 2 or 3 steel frames was no more. Perhaps a spire or 2, and a stretch of asphalt, smoothing material and bricks going up in swift, sharp, vertical outlines without any form or order. Sprinkled with some dirty, discolored chimneys and a few wash lines and crisscross lines of radial areas. And looking down into the sea, I see again a stretch of gray or discolored red brick wall. With tiny, dark, uniform windows and uniform doors, half open and half hidden by shade. With half the bottle of milk standing on the window sill and a few pots of pine. These big flowers are from art. A child comes up to the roof with her dog and sits on the roof stairs every morning to get a sip of sunshine. And as I lift my eyes again, I see rows upon rows of them, miles of them, stretching in ugly square outlines to the distance. More wonder towers, more brick houses, and humanity lives here, cultivated, each family behind 1 or 2 of these buildings. What do they do for a living? It is
Staggering. Good. Okay. So this whole paragraph, right, like what's in my mind is like, what the hell is going on, right? It's just a huge question mark, like what am I reading here, right? Like it's suddenly about something else, and I'm trying to find something that I can hold on to. And the first thing that to me is worth noting is just this. Again, this is a kind of positional statement. Right? It's kind of putting a stake in the ground and saying, okay, this is what I think, and humanity lives here. I'm still not sure if this is a good thing or a bad thing, right? Because he says he's frightened, and then he says it's positively amazing. It's confusing here for me as a reader. So I'm just kind of scanning through this, and then finally, and humanity lives here. How do they live? Each family behind one or two of these dark windows. What do they do for a living? It is staggering. Still not clear his position, right? What do you think? Behind every 2 or 3 windows, a couple go to bed every night like pigeons returning to the pigeonholes. Then they wake up and have their morning coffee, and the husband emerges into the streets, going somewhere to find bread for a family, while the wife tries persistently and desperately to drive out the dust and keep the little place clean. By 4 or 5 o'clock, they come out on their doorsteps to chat with and look at their neighbors and get a sniff of fresh air. The night falls, they are dead tired and go to sleep again. And so they live. Okay, but so what? Have we found the answer? Does he answer the so what here? No, right? That's it. Not yet. So we keep going. Ken, can you read the next part for us?
There are others, more well-to-do people living in better apartments, more hardy rooms and lampshades, still more orderly and more clean. They have a little more space, but only a little more. What a 7-room flat, not to speak, only is considered a luxury. But it does not imply more happiness. Less financial worry and fear debt to think about, but it's true.
Okay, good. Does he answer the so what? Do we get a sense of his position on this whole thing? Or do we need to keep reading? Something is starting to emerge here with his idea, right? That first paragraph here is dedicated to explaining a terrible or a poor living environment, right? How it's uncomfortable. And then the second part, he talks about wealthier people having better apartments, but it does not imply more happiness. So something is starting to emerge, right? What is starting to emerge? What is he trying to say? Something about living, something about happiness. Can we form a sentence to kind of guide us? Put another way, this first paragraph and this second paragraph are describing what? What is it? What is it about? It's a way of what? Just one word. Right? People wake up, people live in this place, they go out, they go to work, they come back, they talk, they eat dinner, they go to sleep, and so they live. So what is this paragraph talking about? What is it describing? Life, a way of life. And what is then his position on this way of life? does it imply, does it lead to a better outcome? So his claim is that this way of life, what? Doesn't make you happy. Good. That's the key, right? This way of life doesn't make you happy. But what's the problem? Is it to make more money? Like, if we get more money, does it make us happier? Is that what he's trying to say? If we raise our social or living conditions, does it make us happier? No, right? Because the second example is the richer people still aren't happy, right? And that means the problem is probably not in how much money you make. He goes on to say, less financial worry and fewer debts to think about, it is true, but also more emotional complications, more divorce, more cat husbands that don't come home at night. Or the couple go prowling together at night, seeking some form of dissipation. Diversion is the word. Good Lord, they need to be diverted from these monotonous, uniform brick walls and shining wooden floors. Of course, they go to look at naked women. Consequently, more neurasthenia, more aspirin, more expensive illness, more colitis, appendicitis, and dyspepsia, more softened brains and hardened livers, more ulcerated duodenums, and lacerated intestines, overworked stomachs, and overtaxed kidneys, inflamed bladders and outraged spleens, dilated hearts and shattered nerves, more flat chests and high blood pressures, more diabetes, Bright's disease, beriberi, rheumatism, insomnia, arteriosclerosis, piles, fistulas, chronic dysentery, chronic constipation, loss of appetite, and weariness of life. To make the picture perfect, more dogs and fewer children. So this is a form of what kind of, actually, irony or sarcasm, right? All of this is to highlight what? What theme or major motif have we established? What's the problem with human life, according to Ling and Tang so far? The problem of human life is we actually talked about it. This is just the expanded, very elaborate example, right? Early on, he established that the problem of life is what? And then because we work, what does it do? It's over here. Human life is too complicated. Good. Right? That's his main thesis on top of humans are the only working animal. They're all like complementary to each other. So, oftentimes in school you're only taught that the thesis is just one thing. It's usually not. It's usually like a relational thing. It's several together, like a triangle, right? His point is, it's important to loaf because we're too busy, and when we're busy, it's too complicated. Complicated leads to suffering, right? It doesn't make you happy because life is complicated. So it's all kind of like connected, right? Your thesis is never just a single point. It's always in several different angles like that. So all of this, right, is just examples of complicated living. Right? Make sense? Okay. The next thing then. The matter of happiness depends entirely upon the quality and temper of the men and women living in these elegant apartments. Some indeed have a jolly life, others simply don't. But on the whole, perhaps they are less happy than the hard-working people. They have more ennui and more boredom. But they have a car and have a country home. Ah, the country home, that is their salvation. So then people work hard in the country so that they can come to the city, so that they can earn sufficient money and go back to the country again. What is he doing? We've seen this kind of writing style before, right? In Heretics by G.K. Chesterton. We've actually seen it in Utopia for Realists as well. He's highlighting something. This is absurdity, right? This totally illogical thing that humans do. We work so hard to escape so we can come back to work hard to escape. Right? That's what absurdity is. The other thing to make note of here is the matter of happiness depends entirely upon the quality and temper of the men and women living in these elegant apartments. What does that mean? What is the claim here? The claim is what? The claim is that happiness is what? Depends on what? Depends on? Depends entirely upon. When we translate this, in what way? Is it just yourself? Happiness depends on what about yourself? What does it mean to say the quality and temper? What is temper? Maybe that's the key word. Or what does it mean to say someone is of high quality? If you describe a person, this person is good quality. Joshua, what do you think? Depends on your... What does temper mean? What does temper mean? Someone's got good tempers or bad tempers. Easily get mad, right? So temper is what? This person has good tempers, it means they don't get mad easily. Meaning? Tempers. Temper of this person. Depends on your what? Give me a guess. Attitude, personality, character. Right? That's it. This is what he's saying. It's never really too far from what you already know. It's always something that you already know. It's just in words that you've never seen or not familiar with. Right? So keep in mind, it's never too far. It's always closer than you think. You just gotta trust yourself. Right? Like Annabelle, for example, this is the same thing as the main argument as this is water. Right? That it is your temperament, your attitude, your mental awareness, right? Your consciousness that determines your happiness. We're back here again. It's the same idea. Matter of happiness depends entirely upon the quality and temper of the men and women. So as you stroll through the city, you see that back of the main avenue with beauty parlors and flower shops and shipping firms is another street with the drugstores, grocery stores, hardware shops, barber shops, blah, 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 blah. You wander along for an hour, and if it is a big city, you are still there. You see only more streets, blah, 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 blah. How do these people make their living, and why do they come here? Very simple. The laundrymen wash the clothes of the barbers and the restaurant waiters, and the restaurant waiters wait upon the laundrymen and the barbers while they eat, and the barbers cut the hair of the laundrymen and waiters. That is civilization. Isn't it amazing? I bet some of the laundrymen, barbers, and waiters never wandered beyond 10 blocks from their place of work in their entire life. Thank God they have at least the movies, where they can see birds singing on the screen, trees growing and swaying, Turkey, Egypt, and Himalayas, and Andes, storms, shipwrecks, coronation ceremonies, ants, caterpillars, muskrats, a fight between lizards and scorpions, hills, waves, sands, clouds, and even a moon, all on the screen. Oh, wise humanity, terrible wise humanity of the icing. How inscrutable is the civilization where men toil and work and worry their hair gray to get a living and forget to play. What is he trying to say? What is he trying to say? What is Ling Yutang trying to say here? Page 146. It's a very long example of sarcasm. Right? The point being what? What is his point? His point is what? It requires you to make a bit of a leap, right? He never really says it straightforward, but it's very clear what he thinks. But you have to make that jump to the point where you can say what he's saying. See what he's saying, right? What is his point? Very, very sarcastic. But what is his point? Ian, what do you think? What's the function, right? What's the function of the sarcasm? Always, like I said before, think about the function. How does it work? What purpose does it serve? Follow the breadcrumbs. It tells you, right? What's the point of his sarcasm? Yeah, what do you think? Can you tell me what's going on here in this scene? Okay, and then? How people live? How people live, right? The problem of life. Remember we talked about it being too complicated? This is assumption. Also, this is an assumption that this way of life doesn't make you happy. He says, first of all, the problem of life is too complicated. He says, second of all, this way of life does not make you happy. And then his sarcasm has a certain function, right? These are still true. The sarcasm, the scene here is that he says there are people in the city, people do things, but it's like, I'm a chef, I cook for people, but I don't know how to cut my hair, so the people that I cook for cut my hair, and the people that wash the clothes of other people. Right? There's a kind of cycle going on. People are this is the economy, right? Where my job is a teacher, but I don't know how to cook and get my food, so I need to rely on a farmer or someone at the supermarket, right? And then I don't know how to get there, so I need someone on an Uber, right? So this is how the economy works. It's always interconnected, right? This is a huge, crazy kind of mesh network, right? It gets pretty crazy. Is it simple or complicated? Complicated, right? So do you think he thinks it's good or bad? Therefore, it's what? Bad. Nice and easy. So he's giving us a description of why it's bad. Right here, right? That is civilization. Isn't it amazing? That's sarcasm, right? I bet some of the laundrymen, barbers, and waiters never wandered beyond 10 blocks from their place of work in their entire life. Now, the second part where he gets really sarcastic is, thank God they have at least the movies. That's the new thing he introduced. What's the point of the movie? To entertainment. And in what ways? How are they entertained? The function of the movie is it entertains. How do they entertain people? Showing nature, right? And why is that sarcastic? Or why is that the ultimate irony? Exactly. That's it. That's the key, right? The irony is this. We are the ones that made ourselves too busy for nature. And because we made ourselves so busy, the only way that we help ourselves is by going to the movies and watch movies about nature. He's absolutely laser focused, right? He knows exactly what he's talking about. This whole time, he has not actually detracted from the argument from the very beginning. That man, the only working animal. He never thought it was a good thing, right? After all, the most about man is his idea of work and the amount of work he imposes upon himself, or civilization imposed upon him. Human life has got too complicated, and the matter of merely feeding ourselves directly or indirectly is occupying well over 90% of our human activities, right? That kind of mental bandwidth is gone. Civilization is largely a matter of seeking food, while progress is that development which makes food more difficult to get. Again, this is a form of the absurd. Right? It's like as you get closer, it gets farther away from you. Right? Have you guys played Mario Party? Where it's like, or was it Odyssey? I forget. But there's like the infinite staircase where like Mario keeps running and the staircase just keeps getting farther and farther. Right? This is the idea of progress and civilization. So he never fails or moves away from his main point, that it's absurd that we're working. Man, the only working animal. Right? Too much work, too busy, too complicated, and it doesn't make us happy. Right? And that happiness depends on your mindset, your consciousness. And then he finally delivers this main idea right here. Right? Again, that we are so busy, the problem of human life is too complicated. This way of life doesn't make us happy, right? Civilization. Therefore what? What's the other thing he's suggesting now? Since we know this argument, what's the flip side? Therefore, take a rest. Hence the title, which is loafing. Right? Right. And if you want to take it one more step farther, hence the importance of living, right? Which is the title of the book. Well, actually, let me rewrite that. Hence, this is how to properly live. Right? That's it. Make sense? It's a lot of work. Well done. Any questions? Anything, parts, sentences, passages you want to highlight or discuss? Is this confusing? Is this too much? You guys following? Yeah? Okay. Yeah.
As Dewey comes this, like, we take a rest while we watch natural. Okay. So doesn't that contradict it? Taking a rest of food loafing?
Oh, okay, I see. So are you saying that like we take a rest by watching a movie, and then he says that we should just take a rest? Is that you're trying to say like why is it wrong to watch a movie then?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Because To him, we watch movies about nature, and the easiest way is we should just go out into nature rather than watching nature itself. I mean, rather than watching a movie of nature, we should just be in nature. But we're too busy to do that. So we watch a movie of it. Right? But you're right, it's a really good point. That, like, what's wrong with movies? Yeah. Any other questions? It's also interesting that we think like that, right? Because when we are, for us, the city people that he's describing, watching a movie is supposed to be a relaxing activity. Just like scrolling on your phone or like being on Instagram, watching YouTube, right? It's supposed to be a relaxing activity. But is it really that relaxing? It's interesting to think about.
And as all opposites admire each other, I suspect that the American culture admires the Chinese culture as much as the Chinese culture admires the American culture. Such things are called the terms of nationality. I do not know if eventually the West can get equally the same practice that they're using now. We're going to need more in the future. As modern civilization started, the communication at least in China, we are not going to solve this machine civilization, and there is a problem with without practicing how we're going to merge these two ancient Chinese philosophy and a modern physical civilization, and integrate them into a civilization. Confucius is very much known as to Occidental life ever being invaded by the Oriental although knowing their
Okay, good, thank you. The question is very much problematical as to Occidental life ever being invaded by Oriental philosophy, although no one would dare to prophesy. What is Occidental and what is Oriental? Huh? Occidental, Oriental? Oriental is new? Is it? What about the hotel? 东方文化. What is it in English? Is it Mandarin Occidental or Mandarin Oriental? Oriental. So Oriental is what? Yeah, East. Of the East. Occidental, therefore, is of the West. But the East and West here is specifically about the political, right? 就是西方世界跟东方世界. Not that this way is East, this way is West. It refers to the political dynamic. Okay. So he's saying that what? As to Occidental life ever being invaded by Oriental philosophy, although no one would ever dare to prophesy. What is Oriental philosophy here in this case? What kind of lifestyle? What kind of philosophy? Are they pro-work or pro-rest? Oriental philosophy. Let's read it again. Top of the first paragraph. Can you read it for us? Yeah. Sorry, no. Other page.
American is known as a great hustler. As a Chinese is known as a great man.
Good. So which one is the Oriental? Which one is the Occidental? American is what? Occidental. Oriental, right? So he's saying the question is very much whether Occidental life, which is pro-working, ever being invaded by Oriental philosophy, which is pro what? Resting, right? Or loafing. So in other words, he's trying to say what about society in the future, Western society? Will Western society what? Not yet. Take an extra step. It's right before that conclusion. So before you get to the point of happier, what do you need? Work more? Rest more. There you go. Right? It's really good that you're thinking about it in those sense, like, will they be happier? Yes, that's the implicit claim, but all he's saying here is that will Western society learn to rest more? Right? Of course, why is this important? Why does this matter? Then that's the answer Annabelle gave us, right? Why does this matter? Because happiness depends on it. That's a better order of the ideas, right? Not skipping ahead. Okay. Jason, can you read the next part for us?
That's how the machine culture effectively brings us near to the age of future. The men will be compelled to play more and work less.
Good. Okay, hold on. Where have we seen this? Where have we seen that? It's in Utopia for Realists, but I want the specific passage that's very similar to this idea. Right? After all, machine culture is rapidly bringing us nearer to the age of leisure, and man will be compelled to play more and work less. Did we read chapter 4 yet? No. Maybe I'm skipping ahead. Hold on. No, we definitely talked about the 15-hour work week somewhere. Oh, what's this one? Right here. John Maynard Keynes predicted that by the end of the century, we would have technology would have advanced sufficiently that countries like Great Britain or the United States would have achieved a 15-hour work week. There's every reason to believe he was right. In technological terms, we are quite capable of this. Yet, it didn't happen. Instead, technology has been marshaled, if anything, to figure out ways to make us all work more. Right? Isn't that the exact same thing that we just spent an hour and a half talking about? Making life more complicated. Wait, there's no other two? Alright. Bigger. Alright, the whole idea is that we've made our life more complicated. Everything that we are reading is connected. Matter is whether or not we're making those connections. Capita is now 10. Oh, here. Okay, Utopia for Realists, page 19. On the bottom. True progress begins with something no knowledge economy can produce. Wisdom about what it means to live well. What it means to live well is the whole point of leisure time, right? For him, what does it mean to live well? Rest more, live a simple life, right? Loaf around, don't work too hard. We have to do what great thinkers like John Stuart Mill, Bertrand Russell, and John Maynard Keynes were already advocating 100 years ago. Value ends above means and prefer the good to the useful. We have to direct our minds to the future to stop consuming our own discontent through polls and relentlessly bad news media. Consider alternatives and form a new collective to transcend this confining zeitgeist and recognizing our shared idealism. Maybe then we'll also be able to again look beyond ourselves and out at the world. There, we'll see that good old progress is still marching along its merry way, right? Again, John Maynard Keynes, right? He must have mentioned him before. I just can't find it right now. Anyway, again, John Maynard Keynes, right here. Right? And, right, the whole point, man will be compelled to play more and work less through progress. It is all a matter of environment, and when man finds leisure hanging on his hands, he will be forced to think more about ways and means of enjoying of wisely enjoying his leisure, conferred upon him against his will by rapidly improving methods of quick production. After all, no one can predict anything about the next century. He would be a brave man who dared even to predict about life 30 years from now. The constant rush of progress must certainly one day reach a point when man will be pretty tired of it all and begin to take stock of his conquest in the material world. I cannot believe that, with the coming of better material conditions of life, when diseases are eliminated, poverty is decreased, and man's expectation of life is prolonged. Remember in Utopia for Realists? The book literally begins with just all of this. All of chapter 1 talks about how disease is reduced, life is made longer, material wealth is increasing. Man will care to be as busy as he is today. I'm not sure that a more lazy temperament will not arise as a result of this new environment. And in Utopia for Realists, Bregman actually answers. Because this piece was written in circa 19... 1937. This was in 1937, and the author was saying, okay, I don't know if we're gonna be lazier, which to him is a good thing, but this book was written like 5 years ago. Is saying, well, we actually managed to make ourselves much busier, right? (2017). So you can make books talk to each other, like this, right? Authors talk to each other. Apart from all this, the subjective factor is always as important as the objective. Philosophy comes in as a way of changing man's outlook and also changing his character. Wait, where have we seen that? Apart from all this, the subjective factor is always as important as the objective. Philosophy comes in as a way of changing man's outlook and also changing his character. Annabelle, you know the answer because you wrote it in your response. How man is going to react toward this machine civilization depends on what kind of a man he is. Where is it that we've seen this? We talked a lot about philosophy. What's the piece that we've read? We read Utopia for Realists, we read On Bullshit Jobs, and we read Heretics. Who can recall what Heretics is about? Does anybody remember? It's all gone, out the window. You guys remember what Heretics was saying? That atheism itself is too theological for us today. A man's opinion on Shankar matters. His opinion on Botticelli matters. His opinion on all things does not matter. He may turn over and explore a million objects, but he must not find that strange object of the universe, for if he does, he will have a religion and be lost. Everything matters except maybe in the beginning he says, The man was proud of being orthodox, was proud of being right. If he stood alone in a howling wilderness, he was more than man. He was a church. He was the center of the universe. It was around him that the stars swung. What about on the right? But there are some people, nevertheless, and I am one of them, who think that the most practical and important thing about a man is still his view of the universe. We think that for a landlady considered a lodger, it is important to know his income, but it is still more important to know his philosophy. We think that for a general about to fight an enemy, it is important to know the enemy's numbers, but still more important to know the enemy's philosophy. We think the question is not whether the theory of the cosmos affects matter, but whether in the long run anything else affects them. In the 15th century, men cross-examined and tormented the man because he preached an immoral attitude. In the 19th century, we feted and flattered Oscar Wilde because he preached such an attitude, and then broke his heart in penal servitude because he carried it out. It may be a question of which of the two methods was the more cruel. There can be no kind of question which is more ludicrous. He is indeed a standing symbol of the epoch, the man who is theoretically a practical man and practically more unpractical than any theorist. Nothing in this universe is so unwise as that kind of worship of worldly wisdom. A man who is perpetually thinking of whether this race or that race is strong, or whether this cause or that cause is promising, is the man who will never believe in anything long enough to make it succeed. Or, let's look at the last paragraph. Suppose that a great commotion arises in the street about something, let us say a lamppost, which many influential persons desire to pull down. A gray-clad monk, who is the spirit of the Middle Ages, is approached upon the matter, and begins to say in the arid manner of the schoolmen, let us first consider, my brethren, the value of light. If light be itself good, at this point he is somewhat excusably knocked down. All the people make a rush for the lamppost is down in 10 minutes, and they go about congratulating each other in their unmedieval practicality. But as things go, they do not work out so easily. Some people have pulled the lamppost because they wanted the electric light, some because they wanted old iron, some because they wanted darkness, because their deeds were evil. Some thought not enough of a lamppost, some too much. Some acted because they wanted to smash municipal machinery, some because they wanted to smash something. There is war in the night, no man knowing whom he strikes. So gradually and inevitably, today, tomorrow, or the next day, there comes back the conviction that the monk was right after all. And all that depends on what is the philosophy of life. Only when we have discovered under the gas lamp, we now must discuss in the dark. Right? So back to the importance of living. Apart from all this, philosophy comes in a way of changing man's outlook and also changing his character. How man is going to react towards the machine civilization depends on what kind of a man he is. Right? It's fundamentally the same thing. We're talking about the same thing. That the way you see the world determines your state of being. Right? And remember, Ling and Tang said earlier, matter of happiness depends entirely upon the quality and temper of the man and woman, i.e. your philosophy. Right? Your philosophy. So this connects with G.K. Chesterton. Right? And within these two couple, like 50 words, 100 words, you get a connection with all the pieces that we've read. Utopia for realists, on phenomenon of BS jobs, right? Education is imperative. Because they're all reaching for the same idea, some kind of truth going on. Right? Okay. Peggy, can you read the next part in the realm of biology? Stimulus? Racial temperament? Okay. Okay, Annabelle, can you read the next part?
Mankind today is more than man and machine civilization. It has always been seen that the future of the world is dominated by the machine. So tendency to it is taking mankind life, the pattern of life. I feel like some kids is true because no one knows yet what the American temperament is going to be. I guess we can only describe it as a changing temperament. I do not think it at all impossible that there may be a revival of that period of music like culture, solo expression, many ways through the world. So one can say that the flowering of meanings and culture was scientifically American culture, and certainly no one can say that the ideal world movement is investigated because the entirely pointing to the development of women and social mothers is not the ideal of democratic government. America needs only to be given a little respite, and there may be, I'm quite sure, there will be new men, new stories, and new laws. When that old American culture, cut short literally and figuratively by the gold rush, may blossom forth again. Well, not then. American temperament is something quite different from that of the present day, and very near to the temperament of Emerson and Thoreau.
Okay, good. The only thing I really want to highlight is this section. What is respite? What does it mean? What does respite mean? Only needs to be given a little respite. What does respite mean? Yes. Okay, that one again. Okay. Chelsea? What is the whole point? Like, well, the last time we talked about American is here where he talks about the Occidental life. What does the Occidental life mean, in his opinion? Rest. Respite literally means rest. So he says, America needs only to be given a little respite, and there may be, I'm quite sure there will be, new Whitmans, new Thoreaus, and new Lowells. When the old American culture, cut short literally and figuratively by the gold rush, may blossom forth again. Right? He's saying, well, the gold rush represents what? Huh? Chance. Okay, but not here though. The gold rush here represents what? Chance to do what? Chance to be wealthy, good. Be wealthy, get rich. By doing what? By getting gold, right? A kind of work. By working. And what is his stance on working again? Or too much working? What is his stance on working? Complicated work. Think about the people that are on the gold rush. Do they loaf around or are they always looking for gold? Always looking for gold, right? So by always looking for gold, you miss the real gold, right? Which is life. Hence, literally and figuratively, right? Because if you're always so busy with the gold rush, you're going to actually miss the real gold. Culture, as I understand it, is essentially a product of leisure. The art of culture is, therefore, essentially the art of loafing. It's only through rest can you have enough space to create good art. From the Chinese point of view, the man who is wisely idle is the most cultured man. For there seems to be a philosophical contradiction between being busy and being wise. Those who are wise won't be busy, and those who are too busy can't be wise. The wisest man is therefore he who loafs most gracefully. I forget the Chinese idiom for this one. But something about loafing and comfortably chilling. Okay. Here I shall try to explain, not the technique and the varieties of loafing as practiced in China, but rather the philosophy which nourishes this divine desire for loafing in China. Blah, 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 blah. Okay. Again, key idea here, right? This idea is exactly the same as the other side of this. The problem with human life is too complicated. This way of life doesn't make you happy. Therefore, right, the way is making ourselves free, right? To loaf around. By loafing around, we have happiness. The wise is he who loafs. In other words, he who gives himself time. Free time and free space. Make sense? Okay. How did the Chinese temperament, that distrust of achievement and success, that intense love of living as such arise? In the first place, the Chinese theory of leisure, as expressed by comparatively unknown author of the 18th century, Su Baixiang, maybe, who happily achieved oblivion, is as follows. Time is useful because it is not being used. Oh, this is interesting. Leisure in time is like unoccupied floor space in a room. So there is an analogy here. Every working girl who rents a small room where every inch of space is fully utilized feels highly uncomfortable because she has no room to move about. And the moment she gets a raise in salary, she moves into a bigger room where there is little more unused floor space, besides those strictly useful spaces occupied by her single bed, her dressing table, and her 2-burner gas range. It is that unoccupied space that makes the room more habitable, as it is our leisure hours which make life endurable. I understand there is a rich woman living on Park Avenue who bought up a neighboring lot to prevent anybody from erecting a skyscraper next to her house. She is paying a big sum of money in order to have space fully and perfectly made useless. And it seems to me she never spent her money more wisely. This is another example of insight, right? This kind of difference in perspective against what we commonly believe in, that you should spend your money usefully. And the most useful way to spend your money is to spend it on useless space, the space that you do not use, right? The rich have a lot of empty space. The richer you are, you tend to live in a bigger house. The house is bigger, and you have a better living condition because there is actually more empty space. Right? This is good insight to think about. What kind of home is really comfortable is the one that has a lot empty, unused space equals comfort, equals happiness, right? Equals satisfaction in life. And then now we want to just connect these two. That physical space as with physical space, so with our time. That's how analogy works, right? It is that unoccupied space which makes a room more habitable as it is our leisure life that makes life more endurable. That's the point. In this connection, I might mention a personal experience. I could never see beauty of skyscrapers in New York, and it was not until I went to Chicago that I realized that a skyscraper could be very imposing and very beautiful to look at if it had a good frontage and at least half a mile of unused space around it. Chicago is fortunate in this respect because it has more space than Manhattan. The tall buildings are better spaced, and there is the possibility of obtaining an unobscured view of them from a long distance. Figuratively speaking, we too are so cramped in our life that we cannot enjoy a free perspective of the beauties of our spiritual life. We lack spiritual frontage. Right? That's exactly the whole point of Utopia for Realists in some way. Right? Figuratively speaking, we too are too cramped in our life. Utopia for Realists argues this whole point, that we are too cramped, too busy, doing nothing, right? Doing something away from nothing. And in another way, G.K. Chesterton said, Everything matters. Except everything. Right? We're so crammed with thinking of things that don't matter that we don't have time to think about things that truly do matter. They're all really just the same idea, but played in a slightly different angle. Okay. Ian, can you read the next part? The cult of the idol life. Good. Okay. Chelsea, can you read the next part for us?
Really not first heard by one thing. Romantic goes up to a feeling which we have to find the color of the
Leisure.
was
Decidedly.
not for the wealthy class, as we usually understand it to be. That would be an
Unmitigated.
motivated error in the approach to the problem. It was supposed for the poor and unsuccessful and humble scholar who either had chosen life or one had by doing this.
Idleness. Unforced autonomy. Idle means not moving, or like not in action. Is what idle means, by the way.
And for as I return materially uncertainties, and as I imagine before schoolmaster teaching the poor, or his songs and lessons glorifying the simple and
I cannot help. Wait, sorry. These poems glorifying the simple and idle life, I cannot help thinking that they must have derived an immense personal satisfaction and spiritual consolation from them. Okay. Not very clear where he's going, right? So let's keep going. Disquisitions on the handicap of fame and advantages of obscurity sounded pleasing to those who had failed in the civil examination, such as eating late when appetite whetted is eating meat, tended to make the fat provider less apologetic to his family. No greater misjudgment of literary history is made than when the young Chinese proletarian writer accused the poets Su Dongtuo and Tao Yuanming and others of belonging to the hated leisure class of intelligentsia. Su, who sang about the clear breeze over the stream and bright moon over the hills, and Tao, who sang about the dew making wet his skirt, and a hen roosting on top of a mulberry tree, as if the river breeze and the moon over the hills and the hen roosting on a mulberry tree were owned by only the capitalist class. These great men of the past went beyond the stage of talking about peasant conditions and lived the life of the poor peasant themselves and found peace and harmony in it. In this sense, I regard this romantic cult of the idle life as essentially democratic. Oh, okay, interesting. Why? What does that mean, essentially democratic? We can better understand this romantic cult when we picture ourselves Lawrence Stern on his sentimental journey, or Wordsworth and Coleridge hiking through Europe on foot with a great sense of beauty in their breasts, very little money in their purse. There was a time when one didn't have to be rich in order to travel. And even today, travel doesn't have to be a luxury of the rich. On the whole, the enjoyment of leisure is something which decidedly costs less than the enjoyment of luxury. All it requires is an artistic temperament which is bent on seeking a perfectly useless afternoon spent in a perfectly useless manner. The idle life really costs so very little, as Thoreau took the trouble to point out in Walden. Okay. All it requires is an artistic temperament which is bent on seeking a perfectly useless afternoon spent in a perfectly useless manner. What is artistic temperament? Well, what is a temperament again? What is temperament? Hello? Temper is what? Huh? Right, which is your attitude. There you go. Attitude, personality, character. And temperament is the same thing. They're all the same. All it requires, which is the enjoyment of leisure, is an artistic temperament. Being able to appreciate the natural and simple things. Right? Is what it takes to enjoy leisure. And that's what artistic temperament is. You don't need money to think, right? That's really not about any of it. Like these examples of dew making his skirts wet, the clear breeze over the sun, over the stream, a hen roosting on the top of a mulberry tree are just simple, natural things, right? Yep. Okay. The Chinese romanticists were, on the whole, men gifted with a high sensibility and a vagabond nature, poor in their worldly possessions, but rich in sentiment. Poor in what they have, but rich in thinking and feeling. They had an intense love of life which showed itself in their abhorrence of all official life and a stern refusal to make the soul serve to the body. The idle life, so far from being the prerogative of the rich and powerful and successful, how busy the successful American men are, was in China an achievement of high-mindedness. A high-mindedness very near to the Western conception of the dignity of the tramp, who was too proud to ask for favors, too independent to go to work, and too wise to take the world's success too seriously. High-mindedness, in other words, is very similar to consciousness or awareness. Being very conscious of what you're doing, having really high awareness of what you're doing. Right? The idle life, so far from being a prerogative of the rich, was in China an achievement of high-mindedness. Which, what he's saying is the more self-aware you are, the better your chances to enjoy the highest form of living. Which is the idle life. Right? This is that quote by Oscar Wilde. Hard work is simply the refuge of people who have nothing better to do. Refuge as in a place to escape. Right? If you don't have anything better to do, if you are afraid of being bored, you would work hard. But the reality is, if you're self-aware enough, you can realize that the best thing you can do is to enjoy, right? To loaf around. Here's another quote. Only those who take leisurely what the people of the world are busy about can be busy about what the people of the world take leisurely. Only if you don't take very seriously what people are so busy doing, i.e. work, can you be busy about what people of the world take leisurely, i.e. enjoying life. Right? Only if you can relax about working can you work hard about relaxing or enjoying life. Very similar quotes. Right? Hard work is simply the refuge of people who have nothing better to do. So we have to start thinking, why are we working so hard? The high-mindedness. This high-mindedness came from and was inevitably associated with a certain sense of detachment toward the drama of life. It came from the quality of being able to see through life's ambitions and follies and temptations of fame and wealth. This is water. For those that get the reference. Somehow, the high-mindedness scholar who valued his character more than his achievements, his soul more than fame or wealth, became by common consent the highest ideal of Chinese literature. Inevitably, he was a man with great simplicity of living, right? That theme again. Simple life. And a proud contempt for worldly success as the world understands it. This is Water is a speech by a guy named David Foster Wallace. And he talks about a story about fish not knowing that it is in water. Right? If you remember have you guys seen the movie Soul by Pixar? You guys remember when after he plays, he comes out and he's like, wait, so we do it again? And then the woman says, there's a fish that swam up to an old fish and says, hey sir, do you know where the ocean is? And the old fish says, the ocean? This is the ocean. What do you mean? And the young fish says, this is not the ocean, this is the sea. I'm looking for the ocean. Right? And it's only until that younger fish can grow up, get older, mature, will they realize this is it, right? This is water. This is the ocean. Now, everything he's been looking for, he's been in it this whole time, right? In the same way, fish realizing it is in water, right, is the moment it can finally relax, right? Like for us, being the fish, it's like if you were taught you need to find water in order to survive. So all we do in our life is finding water. In other words, money, right? But it's only until you realize can you finally relax. So this high-mindedness came from and was inevitably associated with a certain sense of detachment, a certain sense of, again, consciousness and awareness. ability to see. See clearly. Great men of letters of this class, 陶渊明、苏东坡, can't tell these names, were generally enticed into a short term of official life, did a wonderful job of it, and then got exasperated with his eternal kowtowing of receiving and sending off of fellow officials, and gladly, laying down the burdens of an official life, returned wisely to the life of retirement. Yuan Cheng Lang wrote 7 successive petitions to his superior when he was magistrate of Suzhou, complaining of these eternal kowtowings and begging to be allowed to return to the life of free and careless individual. A rather extravagant example of the praise of idleness is found in this inscription of another poet, Hou Yu-chen, written for his studio, which he called the Hall of Idleness. I need to find the manual name for this. Someone talking about it. Maybe something like that. Anyway. Okay, can you read the next part?
I'm from you, mother.
I'm too lazy.
I'm too lazy to read the Taoist classics or Tao Buddhism design in the book. Too lazy to look over the sutras, for they go no deeper in Tao than it looks. The essence of Tao consists in avoiding fear and faith, but what is the void itself of beautiful daylight and gold? Too lazy am I to read poetry, for when I stop, the poetry will be gone. Too lazy to play on the chin, for music dies on the string where it's blown. Too lazy to drink wine, for beyond the sunrise stream there are rivers and lakes. Too lazy to play chess, for beside the pond there are other stakes. Too lazy to look at the hills and streams, for there is a painting within my heart's toil. Too lazy to face the wind and the moon, for within me is the isle of the immortal. Too lazy to attend the woodweed affairs, for inside me are my hut and my possessions. Too lazy to watch the changing of the seasons, for within me are heavenly concerns. Pine trees may decay and rocks may rot, but I shall always remain what I am. Is it not fitting that I call this the Hall of Idleness?
Good. Fine.
This code of idleness was therefore always bound up in the life of inner calm, a sense of carefree irresponsibility, and an intense, wholehearted enjoyment of the life of nature. Poets and scholars have always given themselves quaint names, like the guests of rivers and lakes.
Okay.
The recluse of the eastern hillside, the carefree man of the ski lake, and the old man of the cave-girdled tower.
Good.
No, the enjoyment of an idle life doesn't cost any money. The capacity for true enjoyment of idleness is lost in the moneyed class, and can be found only among people who have a supreme contempt for wealth. It must come from an inner richness of the soul and a man who loves the simple ways of life, and who is somewhat impatient with the business of making money. There's always plenty of life to endure for a man who is determined to enjoy it. If men fail to enjoy this earthly existence we have, it is because they do not love life sufficiently and allow it to be turned into a humdrum routine existence. Lao Tzu has been wrongly accused of being hostile to life. On the other hand, I think he taught the renunciation of the life of the world exactly because he loved life all too tenderly. To allow the art of living to degenerate into a mere business of living.
Good, thank you. So this is a really good part, right? To allow the art of living to degenerate into a mere business of living. It's a really nice way to write, right? Like, there is a difference that we go from art and it becomes a business. What's the difference? What makes it different? One is the art, the other is the business of life. What's gone through this function? To go from art of life and then something happens and it becomes the business of life. What's gone missing? Good. Loss of fun. Right? You stop enjoying. This is the thing that's missing. Right? And how do you enjoy? What do you need to be able to enjoy? Time. Specifically free time. Right? There's another really interesting thing that's worth pointing out is that in his mind, rich and poor, but then there is idleness. There is actually equal opportunity for both the rich and the poor to reach this place, right? You don't need to have a certain amount of money. In fact, maybe money is actually a cause for your busyness, right? Which is why he says that idleness in this way is democratic. Because everyone has a chance. Everyone can get to it. Doesn't require you to be very rich or very poor. You don't have to give up your money to be idle. You don't have to make a lot of money to be idle. You just need to decide that this is what I want. I want to give myself time. Okay. Jason, can you read the last part for us? But there is love.
For where there is love, there is judgment. A man who loves life intensely must be always jealous
Of the
few quickest moments of pleasure that he has. And he must retain the dignity of high-born characteristic of the vagabond. His hours of wishing must be different, and his hours of elected into a kind of religion as the English have done with sword. He must be as impatient as having people talk to him about the stock market at the golf club. As the scientist is as having anybody discuss him in his bathtub. And he must count the days of departing money with the same thought that instead for not having made more trips for discussion, as the businessman feels when he has lost so many.
good. So really the last part isn't that important to understanding this section, right? Just like that last part, the last paragraph doesn't really say much except just the last thing thought. The important thing though is that he is making several big arguments about how to live life, right? That we need to have space and time for ourselves, that we need to find the enjoyment, and that enjoyment comes from having free time. And all of this ties into what we're reading in Utopia for Realists, right? For the Chinese New Year break, I actually want to share with you guys a really interesting piece that I just... Oh, by the way, any questions about the reading? Okay. I actually just started reading this book 2 days ago. I thought it was wonderful, so I decided to make this part of your reading. It's called 4,000 Weeks because that's how long you can live. Right? 52 is a year. 52 weeks is a year. If you live to 100, you get 5,200 weeks. 5200. Right? Think about it. As you read this, think about how it lines up or how it connects with what we read today in The Importance of Living, how it connects with Utopia for Realists, and how it connects with Heretics, because they do connect. And it's really important that if you can draw these connections, it'll help with your not only understanding of the readings, but enjoyment of readings in general. Okay? Any other questions before I let you guys go? There's going to be optional Utopia for Realist reading, just to keep pace. But otherwise, you guys are free to go. Happy Chinese New Year.